systems engaged. Frequencies synchronized. Prepare for incoming transmission. Coming to you from somewhere in the multiverse, this is Robots from Tomorrow. This show is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, and as always your podcatcher of choice. For the full archive featuring over 800 episodes of comics and comics-friendly content like interviews, book discussions, and freeform tomfoolery, please go to robotsfromtomorrow.net. Here is your host, Greg.
Hello, and welcome to Robots from Tomorrow, or welcome back to Robots from Tomorrow, whichever the case may be. My name is Greg. Thank you for joining us. I hope today's guest does not take offense to my describing him as a professional smartass, because I mean it as a compliment of the highest order. Reading his interviews, listening to his podcasts, and looking at his resume, already packed with highlights at a relatively young age, it has become clear that he does not shy away from conflict or controversial opinions because he does the research to back up his words. He leans into the smart side of smartass, and we're all much better for it. This Tucson native has already been a banker, bill collector, marketing manager, jazz festival organizer, pizza delivery guy, radio DJ, stand-up comedian, and director of operations at Top Cow Productions. But it's the jobs of journalist and comics writer that we are probably going to focus on the most in today's chat, because that, to me, is where he has really come into his own. He's worked with J Gonzo on Voz de Mayo, a graphic novel about his activist great-grandfather who helped Arizonan Native American tribes gain federal recognition and save their land from being taken over for freeway construction. He was commissioned by the New York City Public Schools to work on a comic about Dolores Huerta and her work organizing and unionizing farm workers in California. He's been writing the daily syndicated newspaper comic strip Gilthorpe since 2022, only the fourth writer in the strip's 67-year history. He's contributed to comics benefit anthologies like The Good Fight and Where We Live. He's written for DC Comics, Marvel Comics, and IDW. He's written a fantasy epic story with a Mesoamerican base rather than the traditional European one called Helm Greycastle from Image Comics. What if Middle-earth had a South Side? Yeah, that's him. And on top of all of that, he's the Los Angeles chapter president of the National Cartoonist Society. But today, he's here to talk about his latest work from Image Comics, a Chicano noir story set in Los Angeles during the Zoot riots of 1943 and centered around the Sleepy Lagoon murder. Drawn by Gilthorpe collaborator Rachel Merrill, Death to PACHUCO follows Private Eye Ricky Tellez as he tries to get justice for his client in a town where it is in short supply. The trade paperback collection of this series was released on March 18th, and you can read the entire first issue over at imagecomics.com. Writer Henry Barajas may end the first issue with the line, "Now's not a good time to be a Mexican," but I'm hoping that over the course of our chat today, Henry and I get to talk about why it's not a bad time to be in his shoes right now. Henry, hopefully I didn't offend with the opening.
No,
the opening thing.
my whole life I've been called that, but never in an endearing way like you did. So
No.
I appreciate that.
Well, that's what I'm going for. You do have that sort of energy to you. It does seem to propel you into interesting areas and into interesting situations and interesting opportunities. So, having said all of that, my first question, you're getting ready to go out for a night on the town. You want to look as sharp as you can, so you're like, I'm going to pull out the big guns. Tell us what the Henry Barajas Zoot suit looks like. How long is your chain? How wide is your hat? Does it go feather? No feather? Like,
yeah. Well, I mean, the interesting thing about the Zoot suit is at the time it was very expensive. So it was conflated on how many Zoot suiters there were roaming the streets, just to touch back on the subject matter that is Death to PACHUCO. The backdrop of the story is the 5-day war between the PACHUCOs and PACHUCAs and the United States Navy. So a lot of people couldn't afford them, and the ones that did, they really took care of them. They were like the modern day Michael Jordans. Like, you didn't want it up too hard. You were always like, your what they call drapes were nicely pressed, and there was wool, so I couldn't imagine it was very comfortable. When I was a kid, I used to dress up as the Mask for Halloween, so I was wearing a manufactured Zoot suit. So it would be yellow with the like black and white shoes and a red tie and a good length chain, maybe to the knee.
Okay.
Or probably just above the knee so I'm not getting caught in it. But yeah, big hat with the nice red feather. But yeah, I'm more of a grungy kind of guy. So I'm always wearing a flannel over some sort of comic book shirt. And I have an interesting build where it's really hard for me to get pants at a certain, like, I think anybody,
Mm-hmm.
it's like you can't get your perfect length. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a tailor here in Los Angeles, Jimmy Ainew's shop for men 5'9" and shorter
Mm-hmm.
is where I go. So like
Okay.
I get my pants there and they tailor them to my ankles. So I take care of these pants
Mm-hmm.
because they're not cheap, but they're comfortable
Right.
and they fit nice. So, and then I just recently invested in some really nice on sale 60% off Vans from REI because I was going across the pond and it rains a lot there and
Mm-hmm.
I wanted some, slip resistant shoes since I was
Mm-hmm.
always like slipping around out
Yeah.
there. So those are my favorite shoes I'm wearing right now because they're meant for hiking. So there's a
Mm.
good comfort sole with a nice slip resistant flat like shoe. So yeah, that's kind of my zoot suit these days.
All right. I would think comfortable footwear would be something super important for somebody that does like a lot of conventions.
Yeah,
Obviously
for
having to
sure.
stand. A friend of mine gave me some of the best convention advice. Before I go to a convention, I go and get Dr. Scholl's inserts for my sneakers. And he was like, do yourself a favor and do that. And I was like, yeah, okay, we'll see. And then I tried it one time and I was like, oh my God. Oh,
Yeah.
now every
Yeah.
time I see him, I still thank him for it because, man, it is cool. But yeah, the Zoot suit, I mean, it's a hell of a look if you can pull it off, but it's so much of an identity thing. I can see how it would rub other people the wrong way. Like it's very ostentatious. And I could see how it became such a middle finger for the Latino community to the white community, just to be like, look, this is what we do. This is how we're expressing ourselves. And I could see how that would cause friction. The main character, Ricky Tellez, is not your typical private eye, but he's still very much in that mold. How difficult was it to try and find the balance in him to where he was a character that readers could identify with in that role, but he wasn't the same character that we always see in there? Because you do a good job of making him fit where he needs to fit in the story, but not have him be just like a white guy with different skin. Right. So, like, what were some of your calculations in finding out that balance about him?
Ricky to me is like a lot of things I'm not. And that was fun because a lot of times I think writers like to fantasize and be like, well,
Hmm.
what if I was that guy? And one of the best things I did for myself right before I started writing the comic was I bought the Alan Moore masterclass that he did with the
Mm.
BBC
Hmm.
Maestros. And I was like, I got a lot of good information and a lot of good tips and a lot of good reading material from that. There's a book that he suggests called Essence of Eloquence, which breaks down a lot of Shakespeare's work. And
Hmm.
there's so many terms and ways that we speak and write that is from Shakespeare. And I was never a Shakespeare person until I started listening to this book. So a lot of Tellez and a lot of the story is like very much taken from Shakespeare and Sherlock Holmes and Batman as an investigator. But the main source of character inspiration was Philip Marlowe
Hmm.
and having an LA private eye who is always like at the end of all his stories, they're really sad. And there's always this like, well, was anything accomplished here?
Hmm.
It gives the reader this sense of like, well, he did do this, but this happened, which kind of negates the whole thing. And
Hmm.
that's the kind of energy I really wanted to bring. It was also the first time I one of the biggest pet peeves I have in comics, especially with indie comics, is when you read somebody's independent work, it's very much a, hey, this is a movie, but this is like a comic
Hmm.
first because it's cheaper. And this was the first time where I took film noir and film as main sources of inspiration.
Hmm.
And so a lot of it was like, well, if this is going to be a movie someday, this is going to be the first chapter, just like a Philip Marlowe story. And this is going to run for a very long time. And also inspired by Dirty Harry. I grew up, my family loved Clint Eastwood. We watched a lot of his movies. And he's just has this undeniable cool energy. And that's what I was trying to interject in this character, where we all want to have the kind of struggles that he has, and we have the want to have the kind of triumphs. But there is like, and I love sad stuff, so I really
Mhm.
played up that sad cello part of the orchestra to be like, yeah, you don't really want this guy's life,
Yeah.
but that makes it even more attractive.
There were parts of when I was reading it, I'd hear like the sad trumpet, right? The sort of the solo, Jerry Goldsmith, LA Confidential, I guess, or
Right.
I guess maybe even
Yeah.
John Williams from The Long Goodbye, which I think in one of the issues, I think you or Rachel mentioned,
Rachel.
yeah, that movie. I finally saw it a couple of years ago for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. Elliot Gould is not somebody I would have thought to have like in that role or whatever, but he was great. He gets to say the right things to the right people that you're like, oh man, I wish I could have said that, you know. But then as an ending, it's like it's a downer, but it also fits, and so I can see how that energy could be something you were going for here. Speaking of Rachel, let's talk about your collaboration with her. It started with Gil Thorpe. Talk about bringing her onto the project and what it's like working with her in this capacity versus the newspaper strip.
Well, originally she was the person I was going to reach out to about working on Death to Pachuco.
Hmm.
It was just the unfortunate timing that Rod Wiggum decided to retire. And as much as I appreciate working with Rachel and Gil Thorpe, the level of craftsmanship on Gil Thorpe
Hmm.
was on the back of Rod. And God
Hmm.
bless him. I hope he's happy and spending more time with his family. But it really threw a wrench in the whole predicament. So I was like, hey, I reached out to Rachel, like, I really like your work, and are you interested? And she was immediately responded. So that was a positive sign that she was into doing the work. Basically, it was a good thing because then it was like band practice. We
Hmm.
were doing our jam sessions and figuring out, calibrating, our frequencies. So, because in the middle of working on Gil, I was like, hey, this is what I was going to ask you to draw before I asked you to draw Gil. And she was like, I
Hmm.
want to do this. So there was a bit of hesitancy on my end because Gil's really important to me, and
Hmm.
I love the job, and I love Gil Thorpe. He's like my best friend sometimes and my
Hmm.
worst enemy in some weeks, so it was good for us to figure out how we can work, and we created a shorthand. And I was really looking for someone because she had created a comic called Adult Romance. A friend of mine, Franka Lusky, shared it, and I was like, wow, this person knows where to put her blacks. The story is about two broken-hearted individuals that go to a party, and they're going through breakups individually, and then they kind of hook up. And I knew this was going to be my first rated R comic, and I
Hmm.
knew there was going to be a sex scene in it. And the way she handled that, it wasn't like a porn comic. It was very
Hmm.
much two people in like a very intimate moment. And that's what I was looking for this. Was like, I don't want to have an awkward conversation with somebody about not drawing straight up porn, but more like
Hmm.
a realistic scene between two people. So that's
Right.
what it really attracted me to what she was doing in respect to like the balancing act of Gil and Det Pachuco. Is Gil is a job, it's really much like we don't own these characters. These
Hmm.
are at the service of the syndicate. So we have to respect the legacy. We really have to go out of our way to make sure we're doing the best we can. And then with Det Pachuco, we have a lot of creative freedom to do whatever we want. And
Hmm.
that was what I was really hoping, that Rachel would be able to not only use her personal family photography for character ideas, but also her love for cinema and film noir and the noir genre. So I was very lucky that I was able to find a collaborator and a co-creator that was going to. It's not the best paying job. It was paid thanks to our Kickstarter backers and thanks to my success with Voz de Mayo and Helm Greycastle. And then
Hmm.
also pivoting to our partnership with Top Cow Productions, giving us enough runway to tell the complete story, but also work with Lee Louridge, who is, in
Hmm.
my opinion, one of the best colorists of our time.
I want to get back to Gil because again, it just fascinates me on a whole bunch of levels. But for Pachuco, And obviously, in other places in your work, research is something that you do a lot of. It's the bedrock in a lot of your work. Pachuco being set in Los Angeles, you living in Los Angeles, I'm sure there is a wealth of research material and opportunities available to you. How do you know when to stop researching and start writing?
So, La Voz de Mayo, I did 3 years of research, and that was more of like family and my love of Tucson. And once I got partnered with Gonzo, that's when I kind of had to figure like I need to stop and create work for this guy.
Hmm.
That's when it ended. I learned a big lesson there in giving myself creative freedom and giving
Hmm.
myself room to tell a story. At the end of the day, story is the most important thing. You could have a doctorate in whatever field and then tell a bad story and no one cares about how much you know about
Hmm.
something.
Yeah.
So I've given myself a year of what I call pre-production on a comic
Mm.
now. So like I would say 4 to 6 months is dedicated to research, and then the rest of the year is then prepping for, and I might even cut that in half too,
Hmm.
just because I would like to get things out faster and I would like to take advantage of the time I have and the opportunities that I have. So the next project will have a shorter research span, but there is the kernel of the idea came from researching Dolores Huerta and learning about her brother being assaulted
Hmm.
along with all the other Zoot suitors throughout the country. I mean, the Zoot suit is an appropriation of Black culture and jazz culture specifically. So the African American community got it first, and then the Mexican community got it second. So that just sent me on a tailspin to see that these two separate events, the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial and the Zoot suit riots, are connected.
Hmm.
And then I was like, well, what if the same guy, because it is an unsolved mystery, the Sleepy Lagoon murder trial, what if the
Hmm.
same guy did both events? And what
Hmm.
if like the sailors want to kill this guy, but the private eye wants to keep this guy alive, long enough to stand trial?
Hmm.
So that's where I was like, I got a story here. And then sometimes it just happens that quickly.
Yeah. And then Orson Welles shows up, and you're like, okay, sure. All right. I mean, it's one of those things that I feel like when you're doing research, it would have been weird if you had been like, well, I need to pick somebody who was in Hollywood at the time in the 40s. All right, Orson Welles was big. Let's just put him in there. But he wrote about the Sleepy Lagoon. He has
Hmm.
like an actual connection to that, and that would only have been there for you to use because you did the research,
Yeah.
And you're like, nah, no, no, no. Here's my math. I did this, this, and this, and then you're
Yeah,
able
and
to,
that's why
you
in the
know,
trade paperback I
mhm,
republished the Sleepy Lagoon Murder pamphlet. What we would call a zine now, they
mhm,
call it a pamphlet, and to have his like autograph on it and his stamp
yeah,
of approval with the like very incredible just layout of what was going on at the time.
mhm,
I think it helps give it all a little more legitimacy, which like if you look at my like La Voz de Mayo, there's a comprehensive back matter which a lot of educators love and
mhm,
use for
mhm,
their classrooms. And people know me for that. So I want to
yeah.
keep that blood running through that vein.
How difficult was it to get clearance to be able to include that? Was that
There is no, if you go to the book and you open in the indicia, it says hereby permission to reprint. And
there you
we,
go.
the Top Cow ran it by their lawyer and they said I was right.
Again, doing
So
the research pays off. You're like, that's,
it's a
you know,
$700 artifact if you want to buy it on its own as a first printing. So it's not an easy text to get a hold of.
or you could get the trade
Or you
for
can get the
that's a
trade for
Bajoco and you can get
16.99.
value over and over and over. So before you got to LA, before you started doing that, you did stand up. What has stand up taught you about being a comics writer? What did the skills that you developed writing stand up, pacing, and all those things, are they applicable to your work as a comics writer?
100%. I mean, the fear of bombing, I do not have, especially in my comics. You're never going to make everyone laugh.
Hmm.
There will be people in the audience that you can see in the dark with their arms crossed, shaking their head at what you're saying. And then there's people that are spitting milk out of their nose.
Do you remember? Well, I'm sure you do. Your worst bomb,
Oh, of
like the worst
course.
night.
Oh, yeah. Oh, the worst show I ever did was in front of two people. One of them was my girlfriend at the
Oof.
time. And,
Hmm.
you're just like, wow, this is a sad moment in your life. That you're just like, and then like the other comics are on the show. So it, nothing will ever compare to that. So like any
Hmm.
comic that I do, or no, people aren't going to like it, people aren't going to appreciate it, whatever. But
Yeah.
like you said, there is a cadence to how you speak, and there is a cadence to writing and holding one's attention. And, there is like a science and there's a craft involved. So I try to have a rhythm with words on the page that flows through the art, which is the meat and potatoes of the whole thing.
Hmm.
But also when I'm doing stuff like this or when I'm doing a con, the best time is when I'm on a panel and I can literally do stand up and no one knows it.
Hmm. Hmm. I like John Oliver, and I was listening to a podcast that he was doing the other day, and he was talking about, one of the reasons stand up has been so beneficial to him is I want to say emotional calluses. Is that how he put it? He's like nothing else in the world could really get to him in a way because, after your 100th bomb, he's like, there's really nothing anybody can say to him that can get to him. And that's freeing, in a way.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's also not to say that I'm never going to ever feel that bad again.
no.
And at the same time, I am very lucky that when you read off my life, I
Hmm.
have had a life outside of this.
Hmm.
And this comics thing, I know that this is not my life in comics. And I know that I don't have to put so much stock on what people think and what people buy because got to experience some really incredible things. Like
Hmm.
when I was doing the jazz festival, I got to sit in an empty theater while Burt Bacharach was just like trying to figure out a new song. There was literally no one
Wow.
else in the
Yeah.
theater except me and him, where I'm sitting in the middle, and I don't even think he knew I was there. And
Mhm.
he was just tinkering and playing and talking to himself and writing something down. And I will always have that memory for the rest of my life.
Almost literally a fly on the wall while he was doing his, you're just sort of
I was
watching him
yeah,
just
fly in the seat for sure,
fly in the
just
seat.
listening. So I feel lucky that like I've got to experience life outside of this industry and this medium, and I like to bring all that into it. And I think sometimes it shows.
Mhm. Thinking about comics and about your career, one of the other things I listed off was that you were director of operations at Top Cow. How did that come about?
Well, I moved out to LA in 2015, and I did not think I was going to be able to stay here because I was working as one of the early Postmates drivers. I was driving 10 to 12 hours a day,
Hmm.
making very little money. I was working for another publisher at the time. I was working out of his house in the Hollywood Hills, and I was making below minimum wage there.
Hmm.
And it was just so hard. And also, when I left Tucson, I didn't throw a going away party. I left in the middle of the night after a bar shift. So I had every intention of coming back, but there was an opening at Top Cow, and I had a number of friends reach out to Matt Hawkins and say, "You should hire Henry."
Hmm.
And I finally had a job interview, and he tried to talk me out of working there. And I was like, "No, I want to work here. I want to make comics. I want your job." And he
Hmm.
was like, "All right, your first day is WonderCon," when he was at the LA Convention Center.
Hmm.
So I was there part-time. I did everything I could to like show that I was serious about the business, serious about their catalog and their history. And I
Hmm.
was very lucky that I got to work alongside Elena Salcedo. Rest in peace, Elena. She was like my older sister. Sometimes like people would say we bicker like a married couple. We really were in the trenches together for 5 years, and
Hmm.
I had to move on for healthcare reasons. But I still have an incredible relationship with the publisher, and we still work together, obviously, putting out Death to Pachuco. It was like, to me, the best job that's ever happened to me because comics is what I've always wanted to do, and it really prepared me for the best of times and worst of times. And one of my favorite things to say is there's never a good time to launch a new comic book series.
Hmm.
A distributor could be completely upended. There could be wildfires here in California, which is
Yeah.
70% of the business. It
Yeah.
was in the state of California for comics, domestically at least.
Hmm.
So I learned a lot and I had access to the best comic book creators and the business has to offer. So I was very lucky that Matt Hawkins and Mark Silvestri and Elena Salcedo took a chance on me.
How did it make you a better comics creator?
You're learning about the monthly market. You're learning how to talk to retailers and looking for what retailers like out of a creator. I have a comprehensive list of comic book retailers that I literally email and phone call every 4 months.
Hmm.
I decided while I was at Top Cow, libraries are another source of
Hmm.
getting readers. So I started learning and building a database for that. So I will always be so thankful that I got to sit next to Matt Hawkins for 5 years at conventions all around the world and learn how he pitched his story and his incredible patience he has with fans. Like,
Hmm.
there's some people that would just stand by his table and talk to him, and not once did he go, like, go away.
Hmm.
If it were me, I would have been like, get away from me after like 5 hours, but he would literally talk to people and just engage with them as human beings. And I basically was a smut peddler for 5 years. I mean, the book I sold the most was Sunstone, and
Hmm.
people
Hmm.
thought I was Stepan Sejic, and I sold Linda's work. So it was just like learning how to talk to different people, being basically a roadside carny and just like hawking the new elixir that's going to like make people feel something at the end of the day. And I will always be grateful for that. And just to be attached to that history for so long is something you can't buy.
Hmm. So I want to circle again back to Pachuco. One of the things is not just the book, but the covers. Your first two, well, I guess that's not a variant cover, but like your first two issues, you have David Lapham covers. And I know you're a big Stray Bullets fan. What was it like getting cover sketches from David asking for your opinion?
He literally could have spat on a piece of paper and said, "Here's your cover," and I would have ran
Yeah.
it. So this goes back to even before I was at Top Cow. David Lapham did a signing at Atomic Comics in Phoenix, Arizona, and I bought a piece of Young Liar's art from him.
Hmm.
And I used that as an excuse to just sit down and just like take a seat, sit where he was signing, and just be like, "Hey, I know you don't do signings." And I don't think he has done another signing since like
Okay.
15, 16 years ago. Like, I know he had I know a lot about him. He had an appearance he had to do at PhoenixCon that was legal, like a contractually obligated appearance. And then that's when I was like, "Hey man, I'm gonna sit here until someone shows up." And he like did a Sally Hawkins sketch for me from Young Liars. But
Hmm.
I emailed him. I was like, "Hey, I really want to get into comics and I want to be a writer." And he sent me scripts and he gave me feedback. And he was originally going to draw Death to Pachuco with another publisher,
Hmm.
but the publisher decided to pass. And I was like, "Hey, would you still be up to do covers?" And he said, "Of course." And, he's just someone that I've built a rapport with, someone I deeply respect and appreciate. So that was just like, 15 years of him just responding to my emails.
Hmm. Hmm.
And as far
Um,
as for
mhm.
everybody else, I was on the road with Top Cow and they paid me to fly out and be at these shows. So I was
Right.
lucky to have like, because I think one of the biggest things that wrestling and comics has is that you're at different towns all the time and you all end up in the same hotel a
Hmm.
lot of the time. So you're always commiserating at the hotel bar. And
Hmm.
I was lucky to have commiserated with so many of the cover artists throughout the world. And to have Danny, to have Tula Lote,
Yeah.
Sweeney Boo, Ben Passmore, someone who I respect so much, and then
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
bring in people that aren't as notable. Sarah Gordon, I've became really good friends with throughout my travels in the UK. I always treat every comic like my last comic. So
Hmm.
with the covers, I was like, these are the cover artists I want, and these are the cover artists I support regularly. So it was, pure charisma, Greg, and
It
just like,
worked.
it worked. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I was very lucky that comic book retailers were always like, wow, the covers were awesome. And thankfully that helped us a lot. J
Yeah.
Gonzo was
Yeah.
the cover that went viral with collectors and gave us a huge bump. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm very lucky. I love comics. I love the comic book art.
Hmm.
So that was just purely me being a fan.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the list of the people and wondering which roads got them to there. Like, obviously, Gonzo, like, you worked with him before. I'm assuming that was kind of a no-brainer. But, seeing like a Danny cover or,
Well, Danny and I
uh,
worked on a creep show together.
oh,
She
see,
she
oh,
was
I did not know
very,
that.
yeah, very, very, very nice
Mhm,
about us working together. She picked my script out of a bunch that were given to her, and she preferred that one, and
mhm.
that launched
That's,
that friendship. Tulote, someone I've known for a long time, incredible editor Will Dennis was
mhm,
able to secure that for us. And I pitched Will. My dream was to work at Vertigo, and he got let
mhm,
go right before we were going into second stages of possibly working together. So working with Will was a 15-year long journey. Ben Passmore, someone I've really respected, just cold emailed him. Sweeney Boo, someone I've known for a long time and hung out with similar circles, and she had a gap in her schedule and was able to make it work.
yeah. And you're like, okay, I will take advantage of that. Thank you very much. And this and that and the other thing. But yeah, it's a gorgeous looking book inside and out.
Thank you.
Um, so talking comics that don't have covers, Gil Thorpe, how the fuck do you write a 3 panel strip on a daily basis? Like, just walk me through some process. Like, how do you do it?
I think just to go back to your earlier question on how my comedy fits with my comic book writing, I think this is the closest thing. It's topic, premise, punch.
Hmm.
Literally three
Right.
panels, three ideas, and the punchline on that third panel.
But like, do you write like a week at a time? Do you write
I
like a?
do, yeah. So it's what they call a daily strip. So it runs Monday through Saturday. So I
Mhm,
write Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, three panels at a time. Sometimes it's two, sometimes it's four. What I
mhm,
also like to do with this strip, and something that's hasn't been done since I started, was taking all three,
mhm,
making it one panel. So that happens sometimes. And it's a
mhm,
kinetic action strip. So like my favorite thing to do is have actions throughout the panels and it just speak for itself because it's sports
mhm,
and it's these kids' lives. There's always it's literally like a snowball effect.
mhm,
I'm constantly pushing it up and it's constantly getting bigger. And then sometimes it like flows down and
mhm,
it crashes, and that's the end of that storyline. You just roll that hill back up, and you're
mhm,
just constantly, thankfully, having endless amount of ideas just by looking at the headlines, just by looking at what's on sports today.
mhm,
Also realizing that Gil is a living, breathing person in my head. So
mhm,
I have to find ways to ruin his day and to also reward him and the people around him,
mhm.
and just the gift that keeps on giving.
And so, working with Rachel on that, how far ahead are you guys,
We're
if you can
we're
say?
always like a month or we're gonna be farther just because I plan on doing some events around promoting Pachuco. I mean, we're right now we're over a month ahead.
Okay,
So by the time you see what's today's strip, that's like 2 months ago.
okay,
Because of the holidays and because of the Pachuco schedule, we were always like
mhm,
maybe 3 to 2 weeks ahead sometimes.
yeah,
That was like cutting it close. But now we're over a month ahead, and it feels good to have that
yeah,
kind of runway.
yeah,
Again, it's the best job in the world. It sits
mhm,
next to Peanuts and Garfield and Doonesbury in some
mhm.
newspapers. It's an invaluable real estate that I will cherish for the rest of my life.
So, going from that cartoon strip or a comic strip, how did you end up being the LA chapter president for the National Cartoonist Society as somebody who is not I mean, I guess you are a cartoonist, but you're not like, how did that happen?
Nobody ran, Greg.
Showing up, you showed up, and nobody else did.
Yeah, I
And
mean, the previous chapter chair president, Kevin Siegel, and he's such a kind guy. He knows everyone, everyone's friends with him. He was not a cartoonist.
Mhm.
I do consider myself a letter artist. I do
Yes,
lettering.
that's actually a
So
question I have.
yeah, so that helps. But we're the one of the largest chapters. There's a lot of retired or widow members, and we have some new blood flowing.
Hmm.
I'm in the middle of setting up an event with Sergio Aragones to kind of
Nice.
feature him and to have him talking with the chapter, so who
Hmm.
is a legacy member. But yeah, no, I joined because I was like, oh, well, I write a strip. I should
Yeah.
be in this group.
Yes. Yes.
I do not have to be, but it is nice to be a part of this group. And I have to arrange the holiday dinner. So
Mm.
I get to get everyone together at the end of the year. And the other function of this role is to bring together the jury for the Reuben Awards. So we
Hmm.
just before I got on this podcast, I had a conference call with our members to finalize our jury nominations. So that's been sent off to the headquarters. But yeah, I try to be a part of the scene as much as I can. I try to be a participating community
Hmm.
member wherever I am, and I hope to make some positive impact while I'm on this earth.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to imply that I was like, how the hell did you get in
No, it's a
there?
good question.
Because it's easy to think of cartoonists as somebody moving the pencil on the
Sure.
page, but you are on a comic strip, so you are in fact as much of a cartoonist as anybody else in the
I
society.
there is an important part where I'm not drawing, but I am doing the letter art,
Mhm.
which is technically considered art.
That was actually going to be one of my next questions. You do letter a lot of your own work. Did that start as more of like a cost-effective move, or is that like an aesthetic choice? How did you pick up that baton, pen, quill, whatever? And what has it taught you about your own writing in particular, being the person who has to not only come up with the words, but make them fit on the page
Yeah.
that has all this other art that you don't want to cover up?
Well, of someone I have had a falling out with was kind enough when I was 18, 19 years old. He was a Joe Kubert alum, and he taught me how to letter. And he was also like very cool about sharing his wisdom from the school and his appreciation for the craft. So I started lettering my own comics when I was 18 years old when I first started. So it was just something I already did. As I started to learn more about the craft and learning that Brian Michael Bendis lettered his own comics, so that was someone I looked up to. But Lapham letters his own
Hmm.
comics. One of the things that I learned early in comics was you're going to work with people that have to draw the comic and
Hmm.
probably color the comic and probably put it together. The least you could do is offer something that they don't have to do. And
Hmm.
lettering was one of those things that is a little easier to do. So after becoming a comics journalist, after being in journalism, I kind of stopped. And then when it came time to like, basically what I would do is I would just like, I'd be like, oh, well, here's the page that I think, and then I would letter where I would think the things would go. And I was like,
Hmm.
oh yeah, I know how to do this. I forgot. And not that I forgot, it's just like it's been a while.
Hmm.
So when Rachel took over, I was like, look, if you draw, I'll letter it. So you don't have to worry about that. And so again, back to working with Rachel in the beginning of Gilthorpe, us working together, me lettering those strips and honing my craft again and shaking off the ring rust was good for Pachuco. And yeah, I mean, you want to pay your letter at least
Hmm.
$30 a page.
Hmm.
And so I'm essentially taking that job. And it also, like you said, what it taught me was I have an idea at the beginning, but a lot of writers say writing is rewriting. That's
Hmm.
where my rewriting largely
Hmm.
goes a lot of the time. So it's always good to get there and go, oh yeah, I'm going to fix it here.
Hmm.
A lot of times the artist will surprise you and give you something better than what you had thought. And you don't have to say some things because the art is speaking for itself.
You have contributed to at least a few benefit anthologies. How did those come about? Were you invited to participate in like the good
I think when
fight?
I was invited for that one, I lobbied for where we live
Okay.
because my community was impacted by gun violence. And my friend Will Dennis was the editor, and I was like, hey man, if there's anything I could do, let me know. And he said, well, we have a couple of people that were there that want to tell their story. Would you be okay interviewing them
Hmm.
and telling their story? And I was able to round up Isaac Goodhart and Kelly Fitzpatrick, and I lettered that story. So yeah, it's gonna sound corny and it's gonna sound like I think a lot of my contemporaries, a lot of people I look up to, see comics as a powerful artifact.
Hmm.
And comics has brought you and I together,
Hmm.
has, given me some incredible friends and allows me to travel the world. And I will always be grateful for it. And I feel very lucky that I've been able to use it to help, people less fortunate than myself and that have experienced incredible hardships. So I feel very lucky to participate in in those two at least. There's another one I worked on, but comics is to me the greatest artifact in the world, and I do my best to keep it, to do my best to contribute to it as much as I can.
Hmm. I do not think I can let you go before I ask you about MorrisonCon. We are 12, no, 13-ish years
Is it?
afterwards,
Yeah.
because it was 2012.
Oh, okay.
What do you remember about it?
Oh, I remember everything. I remember, I loved the concert, that first day where you're like
Okay.
in that underground concert. And I remember just talking to somebody, and I just recently was able to recant this story with Jonathan Hickman at Comics Row. I was like, you probably don't remember this, but I was standing at the bar, and you just came up to me and said, "Hi, I'm Jonathan." And I'm just like, I know, you're fucking Jonathan Hickman, and he was just like, it was that kind of show where like nobody really knew each other, or some people did. And there was creators like Jonathan Hickman and Chris Burnham who were like super approachable, really
Hmm.
kind people. And for me, like Grant Morrison is my first comic book writer that I knew the name, I followed the work, and I really admired the swings and the high concept ideas.
Hmm.
So to go to that show and say, "Hi, I'm Henry. We have the same birthday," was
Oh,
just like meant a lot.
wow. I did not know that.
And he's like, "Yeah, but I'm much older than you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know.
Yeah, yeah. You got
We
that.
still have the same birthday." Yeah. But what do you remember?
Oh, I wasn't there,
Oh,
but I think I know at least one other person who went, David Crispino.
yeah, yeah. That's where I met David
So
and
I knew
Khalil.
him, and then I think I had seen that you were there, and then he was like, "Oh yeah, Henry." So then I was like, "Oh, it's weird because I knew him and I knew of you from like the internet stuff, but to have like
Yeah.
an actual triangular connection."
Uh, yeah, no,
Um,
it was one of my favorite moments was Derek Robinson was playing I Want to Hold Your Hand on the guitar,
mhm,
and Grant singing along was like,
mhm.
wow, like this is so cool. I've never seen another show like it.
The uniqueness of it and it being centered around him, he is a singular creator. Felt like a really
It was a good
interesting.
time because Happy was coming out and James Gunn was there before Guardians was out.
Mhm.
I remember Dan DiDio and Jim Lee and Robert Kirkman. It was just like a huge moment in the history at the time. I didn't have the money to get the full package, so I got a discounted ticket, but I couldn't stay at the hotel. So I was at this motel where this woman was screaming day and night outside of my window. It was very much a like, I was wearing a suit at the time.
Mhm.
So I felt very Hunter S. Thompson-esque, where I'm just like, day three of MorrisonCon, I haven't slept, and I can't afford a cab, so I'm
Yeah.
walking, a mile to and from the show. It was a humbling experience, but I came away with some lifelong friends.
Yeah. 12 years later, you are a comics writer of your own importance. You have a new trade paperback that's just come out. I think you mentioned that you are sort of in between projects at the moment.
I mean, I'm currently not working at this moment on anything. I'm going to start pre-production on my new series. Thankfully, Gil is always ongoing, but my
Yeah,
next
yeah, yeah.
series will definitely be a fantasy, and I have other ideas. It just depends on what takes shape faster.
Do you have more Ricky in you, do you think?
Yes, you read the book, the
Hmm.
last issue, last chapter, last page. I did the James Bond-esque Ricky Tellez will return.
Hmm.
My goal is for this to be adapted.
Hmm.
and I want the actor to grow with it. This story takes place in the 40s. The next story will take place during the 50s and so on.
Hmm.
So there are thankfully an abundance of racist events that have happened in LA that I will
Yeah.
use.
Fortunately, unfortunately,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
This city.
there is no dearth of subject matter.
I mean, I will tell you this, Bunker Hill will play a big part in part
Mm,
two. I'm excited for him to grow old. I want him to
mhm.
be Columbo age in the 80s, and just
Okay.
like I've seen this city grow and
Mhm.
blow up. I'm excited for him to get old and wise and I look forward to seeing as much as I can of Ricky because he is without a doubt the coolest character I've ever come up with.
Mhm. Do you want to wait a certain amount sort of between
Oh
each
no.
one of the
No.
things?
I
Like,
want them to
do
be I want them like I love my favorite ongoing comic is Criminal.
Mhm.
Ed and Sean, Ed Brubaker. I don't know these people personally. I got to know Sean Phillips recently, but
Mhm.
Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips have been doing this a long time. They've
Mhm.
got a show coming out. I imagine that they're going to want to fixate on the show. So I
Mhm.
want to pick up the baton and I want to do an ongoing crime comic. If we can get enough money going and enough interest going, I want to do well, realistically, it's going to go to trades,
Mhm.
but I would 100% do ongoing monthly comics as a, kind of criminal-esque, but the next Ricky Tellez will be a complete graphic novel
All right. Well,
or a pulp novel. I am
oh,
also toying with the idea of writing a pulp novel just so that I don't have to pay a whole art team and I could just do it all on my own. And then be like, here's the book. Do what Darwin Cook did for
yeah,
what's it
yeah.
called?
Parker. Yeah,
Parker.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You're like, I'll be
Parker
Richard.
this.
I'll be Richard Stark. That's cool. You guys, here you
It's one
go.
of those things like if I can write the novel and then an
Yeah.
artist can be like, yeah, I can figure it out and I don't have to
Yeah.
write another script and do all that. I mean, I'd be happy to write another script, but if I can just pulp it and
Yeah.
then people can take it on from there,
Yeah. Well,
hopefully there is some interest. Things are looking bright right now.
definitely when either iteration of that happens, I'd love to have you back on the show to talk about it.
I'd love to be
When,
back.
whenever your next non-Gilthorpe thing materializes, I'd like to have you back to talk about that. And there's a bunch of other stuff we didn't get a chance to
I
talk
mean, I mean,
about.
what else did you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I didn't really get to touch on your New York,
Department of
the,
Education comics?
yeah, the
Yeah.
Department of Education stuff, Dolores Huerta, or the
Sal
other.
Castro.
Yes, which I unfortunately did not know about until like 10 minutes before recording. And I realized it was History of Resistance number two and this. And I was like,
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
two? Fuck. Okay.
Well, yeah, I just got off the phone with them today, and we're going to
Uh-huh.
start working on number three this year.
Okay.
Excited for that. But yeah, Dolores Huerta, I mean, I called the shot at the end of La Voz de Mayo. I literally said I want to write a comic about Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. And this was
Hmm.
before all the sexual allegation. I mean, wouldn't it be funny? This was post sexual allegation.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now's the
But no.
time to do that. You're like, ooh, read the room. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but I feel very lucky that I got to tell her story. I started writing that in 2023. We had it
Hmm.
all done and out by 2024. Thankfully, there isn't a lot of adult, not adult, but not like they call it adult comics. Um, but just like general audience
Hmm.
kind of thing. Because there's very like chapter Dolores Huerta comics, and then there's like the movie that Santana produced, and then there's not really a very proper biography, I think. So if you go to that PDF, which anyone can
Hmm.
read out of the Civil Comics group,
Yep.
at the back, it was the first time I did a reference guide, so there is like a lot of links that I used and a lot of references I use that I had to use because there wasn't like a singular Dolores Huerta biography.
Yeah.
It's not perfect, but it's
No.
very much an encompassing. You can't tell her story without Cesar, and you can't tell her story without the union organizers around her that influenced her and that made her who she is today, literally, to this
Hmm.
day in her 90s, doing countless talks and benefits for civil rights activists, for workers' rights activism, and for political figures in the future.
I'm looking at the PDF now, and that is two full pages of references and links and
Videos,
stuff.
movies,
So
books,
yeah.
Anthology. Yeah, and the budget for that was incredible. It's the best I've ever been paid to write a comic. It was the best rates I've ever been able to give artists. I feel very lucky that I got to do that with an incredible intention and a very generous page rate, which I don't get very often, if at all.
So when they reached out to you, was it like, we want you to do this, here's the money, you show run that thing and then
Yeah,
you give it
yeah.
to them?
It came from Mayo being incorporated into the American history curriculum for grade 11. So they knew I could do it. They
Mm-hmm.
wanted me to do the thing
Oh,
I
that's
did
true.
for La Voz for
Yeah.
this. And I worked with Louis Chen on a comic that's Slay Asian. It's like this like influencer group that wanted to like make themselves into superheroes right after Crazy Rich Asians came out.
Hmm.
So I got partnered with him and he was so fast. I loved his storytelling abilities. And we were like a hand in a glove, a perfect unison, and was such a professional that he's the guy I'm leaning on for these things. And then Gabs Contreras as the colorist that I've been a fan of, so we were able to get Gab
Hmm.
folded in and to like, help color brown people in a good way because a lot of the times it's like a sepia tone, like dirty brown that a lot of these, comics get, especially when they're Mexican, or even if you see them on the screen, it's always like brown washout kind of tone. So I really wanted to like celebrate her and her bright life.
Hmm. I did the stupid thing of opening up the PDFs as you're talking. So I'm listening to you, but I'm also sort of scrolling through hers and then Sal's I'm looking for right now. Seeing that you got to work with Louis again, the same team for this one as well.
Yeah, we try to
And
keep
it,
a certain continuity, so that people
yeah.
can, keep up and enjoy that.
Yeah, this group also worked with Andrew Iden and Good Trouble comics and stuff as well. I've talked to Andrew in the past. So when I saw that you had done something for them, I was like, oh, I wonder if that's the same thing that like the Good Trouble people did. And I went to the
It's not.
website and it,
Yeah. Thankfully, I was able on my own accord to get involved with Civics for All
mhm,
comics. Obviously, I have said this many times. Andrew Eden, Nate Powell, and the late great Congressman Sean Lewis were the direct inspirations for La Voz de Mayo. I just
yeah,
had a phone call with Andrew last week. We might be doing something together, so keep your eyes peeled for that. And
very, very
always,
nice.
always grateful for Andrew and Good Trouble Comics.
Yeah, I am going to close that web page so that I can actually talk like a regular person because I'm scrolling through all these covers and all this stuff, and I'm just like, ooh, shiny. Nope, I have something else going on. I'm actually having a conversation, and I just closed my notes. Henry, thanks so much for doing this. The book is Death Pachuco, trade paperback. It is out already. People should go and check it out. And where can they follow you to find out what new stuff you have coming out?
Well, my newsletter, Latinx Press, Button Down, is the best place where I post photos
Hmm.
there because our social media feeds are being used to train AI,
Yeah,
and I don't want my friends or myself to be used in that fashion. So, a lot of my more personal details and where I post everything is my newsletter. Blue Sky is the second best place. I really like that platform, but I'm confident that it's gonna blow up at some point.
yeah. But for right
But
now,
but for right now,
not.
the best place to find is
Not
your local comic book store.
okay. Great. Thanks again for doing this. I
Thank
know
you,
it's
Greg.
been something I've been trying to do, and I finally got my act together and made this happen. So,
Anytime,
yay for
anytime, my
me.
friend, anytime.
All right.
Thank you for listening. Systems disengaged.